Randy Savage. Easily one of the greatest professional wrestlers of all time. He's won both the WWF and the WCW World Heavyweight Championships, each on multiple occasions. He even managed to win both of them after winning the WrestleMania World Heavyweight Title Tournament and WCW's World War III respectively. Not to mention that he also once held the royal title of being known as the Macho King. However, out of all the accolades that he's accomplished in his illustrious career, if you believe that he was given this majestic moniker due to him winning the King of the Ring, well, you're sadly mistaken. But fear not, because maybe it's time to finally clarify this magnanimous misconception. And that's exactly why it's the topic of this episode. Because today, Dave knows the Macho King, Randy Savage. What makes this so confusing is that yes, Randy Savage did win the King of the Ring tournament, and yes, he also went by the name the Macho King for a period of time. However, those two things have nothing to do with each other, as Savage didn't even become the Macho Monarch until about 2 years after winning the King of the Ring tournament. So what exactly happened? Well, let's just review several things in order to finally get around to answering the question, how did Randy Savage go from being the Macho Man to becoming the Macho King? First, how about we start by reminiscing about a pay-per-view that I sorely miss a lot, the King of the Ring. From 1985 to 2002, KOTR regularly ran as an annual event. However, there was no tournament in 1990 or 1992. And WWE did bring it back on occasion in more recent years, such as 2006, 2008, 2010, and 2015. But even though many fans know it as formerly being one of the big 5 WWF pay-per-views, it didn't become a pay-per-view proper until 1993. Before that, it was simply just a Supercard live event. Now, during the years in which the tournament occurred, some winners have taken winning it as an opportunity to change their gimmick into being that of an actual kayfabe king. And past winners to do so included Wade Barrett, Sheamus, Booker T, Kurt Angle, Mabel, Owen Hart, and the second winner ever and the first to use the royal gimmick, King Harley Race. Now, of course, how long the gimmick was used for and how committed they were to it did vary, as Edge did refer to himself as King Edge the Awesome, but never really went full regalia following this win. William Regal did give himself a royal throne, but again, never switched to a new character. Plus, there were plenty of other wrestlers who accepted the crown during their victory coronation, but didn't carry it on much further than that. But as I'm sure you noticed, I didn't mention Randy Savage. But let's fix that now and talk about what got him to the crown, starting way back at the very beginning of his career. Right after high school, young Randy Poffo signed with the St. Louis Cardinals baseball organization. He went to the minor leagues to develop his game, playing as an outfielder and moving around to different farm systems. And unfortunately, at one point he injured his right shoulder during a collision. However, that didn't deter him, as he just learned to throw with his left arm instead, because he's just apparently that good. Speaking of how surprisingly talented he was, during the 1973 offseason, Randy decided to give wrestling a shot and he immediately excelled, which does make sense considering that his father Angelo Poffo was a solid wrestler himself. Now, Randy would take on the ring name of Savage due to one of his trainers, Terry Stevens and Ole Anderson, feeling that the name Poffo just didn't fit him, and that he wrestled like a savage. As for the Macho Man part of the nomenclature equation, that came about when Randy's mother saw in an article in Reader's Digest that claimed that the phrase would be the next hot term. Then in June of 1985, Savage would sign with the World Wrestling Federation and was billed as the top free agent in all of professional wrestling, having his pick of WWF managers ready to take him on as a client. However, in the end, Savage would pass on top representatives such as Bobby Heenan, Jimmy Hart, and Freddie Blassie, instead deciding to go with the lovely Miss Elizabeth. Which seems to have been a good choice, because within his first year in the company, Savage would capture the Intercontinental title from the legendary Tito Santana, and his run with that belt would last all the way until the following year at WrestleMania 3, where he lost the title to another legend, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, in a match that many would claim is the greatest wrestling match of all time. Then later on that year, Macho would go on to become the third ever winner of the King of the Ring tournament, behind Don Morocco and Harley Race. But after winning it, he didn't start calling himself the Macho King. Nope, Savage went about with his usual moniker. Meanwhile, the previous winner, Harley Race, was still using his win as a mechanism that triggered his royal identity crisis and was still fancying himself as a king, which he continued to do so until he was sidelined with an injury. During his absence, Harley Race's manager, Bobby the Brain Heenan, passed the crown down to another one of his clients, Haku, who then became King Haku in the summer of 1988. Now, what's interesting about this royal gimmick is that during Haku's reign, other King of the Rings were actually crowned, such as the aforementioned Savage as well as Ted DiBiase. Furthermore, the former King Harley Race came back after healing up, and upon his return, he went against Haku at the 1989 Royal Rumble in order to regain his cape and crown, but to no avail. However, Haku's reign would come to an end in May of 1989 when he lost the crown to Hacksaw Jim Duggan, who became King Hacksaw. And when we look back at this period of time, the title of King was almost like a championship itself, as it became completely independent from the King of the Ring tournament that first spawned it, being contested, defended, and changing hands between wrestlers. Speaking of which, we're not done yet, as King Hacksaw's reign wouldn't last very long, as just a few months later, Hacksaw would lose his royal status to Randy Savage, who officially became the Macho King. And in proper fashion, the Macho King was given his own coronation ceremony, hosted by the Genius, who is actually Savage's brother, Lanny Poffo. And during this ceremony, former King of the Ring, the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase, presented Savage with a brand new royal scepter to go along with his cape and crown. And further separating Savage's reign from other previous kings, his coronation crowned him as not just the King of the Ring or the wearer of Harley Race's crown, but as the King of the WWF. Which was definitely a fitting title to be sure, because in between his actual King of the Ring tournament win and becoming the Macho King, Savage accomplished quite a lot, becoming WWF Champion by winning the WrestleMania Championship Tournament, main eventing WrestleMania the following year by defending his title against Hulk Hogan despite suffering from a real-life elbow injury, as well as getting a brand new manager in the sensational Sherry. And lastly, something else that separated the Macho King from other kings is that he was the last, in terms of this specific lineage that is, because Savage would remain king until he lost a career-ending retirement match against the Ultimate Warrior at WrestleMania 7, even though he was eventually reinstated and ended up regaining the WWF Championship at WrestleMania 8 the following year because, well, it's wrestling and retirement almost never means anything anyway. Following this, new kings would come and go after winning subsequent King of the Ring tournaments in the years to come. And of course, Jerry Lawler would also sport a crown as well. But despite all these other members of wrestling royalty, for some, the one true WWF crown will always belong to the Macho King, Randy Savage. Well, there you go, just a bit of clarification on one of wrestling's biggest misconceptions. But what are some others that you think need clearing up, and who do you think is the real king of wrestling? Let me know down in the comments, and don't forget to support me over on Patreon, just like The Woos, Richard Lee, and Jesus Ferro. Thanks so much guys for keeping the channel going, and as always, Dave knows.